Okay, good afternoon, everyone.
Afternoon, sir.
Okay, thank you very much for joining me today on today's lecture. Um, Thank you for coming on time, and yeah, let us begin now. Before we begin to our material, I'm going to ask you, how much do you know about SLA? Does anyone have any idea what is SLA?
No, sir. How you acquire the second language?
Okay, you are correct. SLA stands for Second Language Acquisition. Now, specifically, I want you to understand and I want you to learn is regarding about how the interlanguage of SLA is working. Now, from our previous material that we have given you and you have studied, you understand what is interlanguage. And if you don't understand, I am going to give you a short and simplification. Essentially, what is an interlanguage? It is a process of which that a first language experience or an L1 person, a person with a native speaker, is currently in a process of learning a new language or an L2 experience. Now, that is at its core what it means by interlanguage. Now, we're going to begin our lesson, and the topic that I'm going to give you today is regarding about the social and discourse aspect of interlanguages. Now, what again? This is the interlanguage. An interlanguage is a systemic ways of how a person and a lecturer or a learners learn a native language and for their target languages. Now, specifically for this topic that I'm going to teach you and I'm going to give you an information about is regarding about the social and discourse aspect regarding interlanguages. Now, you might be asking what is a social and discourse regarding the aspect in interlanguage. Now, we begin with the social aspect of interlanguage. Now, regarding this, it is an adjustment in a language based on people and specifically a situation. I'm going to give you an example. For example, Erika, he is currently learning English. Now, in the process of learning that second language, Erika does not 100% understand the language, 100% understand and spoke the actual English language, and during his way in studying the language, she will make mistakes. She will make a certain semantics or not pronunciation mistakes. Now that in certain circumstances is influenced by the situation and the environment that Erika is in. For example, in the environment of school or in the environment of an educational institution, Erika would more likely learn English in a more formal and situated manner. However, we cannot guarantee that Erika, in a friendly or in otherwise a different situation or a different environment outside of an educational institution, will understand or actually learn English in a proper way. Now, the second one that I want you to learn is about the discourse aspect of interlanguage. Now, this consists of how learners organize sentences and ideas, keep conversation flowing, and focus on the first meaning, grammar, then develops later. So, the analogy that I'm going to give you today, for example, is Ersha. Ersha, for example, she is currently on her way of learning English language. However, her methods of learning is understanding the meaning in the first language, which, for example, in this case is Indonesian, to the second language, which is English. A word in an Indonesian, Ersha will translate the Bahasa Indonesia to that of the second language, which is the English language. Now, in terms of organizing sentence, her guideline will be in the sentence structure made by the Indonesian language. But in certain situation and certain circumstances, the structure and grammar structure of an Indonesian language is not going to be correct versus that of an English language. If Arsha, for example, continues and use that sentence structure by Indonesian language and transfer that to the English language, it will be incorrect, or in some circumstances, it will be very wrong. But even though the grammar structure is incorrect, the meaning is there. The meaning that Arsha wants to intend and Arsha wants to say will be understood, or will be eligible to be understood. Now, this is the real example. I already given you analogy, but this is some of the ways that real life example that you can see. First, for example, an identity shift. An identity shift, as an example, is when I speak English, I feel different person, more formal maybe. Well, that's the thing. When you are learning a second language, the way and the attitude that you are going to learn versus that of your native language and to the second language is going to be different. The situation that you are is very different. In a way and a course of learning a second languages, a formal and education institution will be more likely places for you to learn the second language. In school, for example, in your university, in your campus, or for example, in a private tutoring. Now, that identity that you have given to yourself is going to be very different than you are in your daily life or when you are speaking your first language. Now, another thing is just the negative transfer. This is what I given the analogy of the Arsha again. I and my friends discuss. Now, this is grammatically incorrect. However, in meaning, you understood the meaning or what it is intended. But it is based on the idea that you use the English and the Indonesian grammar structure and you try to use that in an English one. Well, in reality, an English grammar structure is not going to be the same as that of the Indonesian one. Now, the third one will be the code switching. Especially in the interlanguage experiences, learners do not use one simple language, one singular language. They are not going to use that, they are going to use a second language. Now, in that case, using a second language will infer code switching. Now, my roommate always speaks English with foreign lecturer, but use bahasa with her friend. Now, in these instances, bahasa there is a way of code switching because bahasa the inferrer or the spoker there more give intended to the bahasa Indonesia and not bahasa as language in English language. The fourth one will be pragmatic error. Now, in terms of pragmatic error, an example of which is why you switch language so fast. Now, this is a situational and an environmental, a circumstantial based idea. Now, with the last one, which is politeness. My female friends say please and thank you more often than boys. Now, if you understand this situation, if you understand what it is, by the meaning of this, it is essentially means that in terms of understanding the social environment, a female will more likely to give more gratitude or say thank you and please than that of boys. Now that is again an example of social and discourses aspect that you can see and you can learn. Now this is quite important, which is the error analysis in social context. Not all learners' error comes from grammar problem. Some are caused by social and communication reasons. Now what this means is that a learner's errors or incorrectness in speaking and learning the second language is not going to be as always be a grammar problem or they are making a mistake in terms of grammar or tense and structures, but always it could be social reason, it could be communicative reason, there is a miscommunication between one person to another. This is, for example, when you switch language so fast, it is an informal type of way of speaking, but it's in a friendly tone. Do you speak two languages? Fossilized form, but still is a very communicative one. I and my friends are. This is an L1 influence, which is the Bahasa Indonesia, and they misguided into the English language. Now, this is the implication of SLA. The implication of SLA it consists of language learning is a social construct. It is a social mandatory. In that, language is learned from real communication and not only grammar. You cannot just be in a school or reading a book to understand a grammar. You also need to be in a real life example, to be talking to one another, to be talking almost daily in terms of building that sentence structure or English language competency. Two, which is put more focus in learning pragmatic. What that means is that how to speak politely and or casually. And the discourse sentence is more likely to how this sentence connects to one another. Now the third is build identity in a real language. It could be formal, it could be friendly, it could be confident. Depends on the situation and depends on the circumstances. Now use authentic communication, not real conversation and not textbook. Now what this is means that you cannot, when speaking to someone, when speaking in a formal or informal manner, you do not need to keep following the guidebook or an instruction manual or something like that. No, you have to build the communication by yourself. You need to understand how a person-to-person conversation or face-to-face conversation works. And the last is focus on meaningful, which is almost the same as the authentic communication one. Now, this is the conclusion. Now, interlanguage reflects how learners live and use language, and not just how they learn. And the social aspect, languages can be changed, is often changed depending on context and relationship and formality. And the last, which is the discourse aspect, learners organize thoughts to create a meaningful conversation. These aspects shows that language learning is a social, interactive, and dynamic. Now I'm going to give you a quiz regarding on the understanding of the topics that you have learned today. I'm going to give you 3 simple open-minded questions. I want you to answer it, and once you answer it, it will be shown on the board, and we can understand them together based on your individual preferences or your individual experiences. All right. It seems that you already answered, already given an answer. Now let's analyze this situation. From your understanding, regarding what challenges do you face when trying to keep a conversation flowing in a second language, some of you answer limited vocabulary. Not some of you, but rather some understand that limited vocabulary is sometimes a lot of the times are more likely how a person in learning a second language analysis is going to make a mistake due to the fact they are unable to or unable yet to receive a lot of more different and diverse vocabulary in the second language competency. They are more likely to make a mistake. Now that is true, but at the same time, also realistically, always that is the process. A process in learning an interlanguage is that you are going to be wrong, you are going to be incorrect, and you are going to be needs to continue learning. That is the reality of how you are learning an interlanguage and how you are learning a second language. Limited vocabulary is one of them. Another one is wrong grammar. Wrong grammar is also how a person is going to learn about their second language or mastering their second language. In terms of that, you need to learn the reality of which that understanding this is a way and the formula of how you are going to master a second language in competency. Now the last one is that it's quite interesting is that I face a conversation like I forgot the structure rule or I forgot the vocabulary. Now, individually, it is realistic. Individually, that is correct. A lot of this example of which people who are learning a second language competency, who are in the way or in the process of mastering a second language, they are going to keep forgetting about the sentence structures that is going to be given on the second language. This is due to the fact that the first language, the internal fossilization in their mind to understand that the first language is going to be, the grammar structure is going to be as the same as that of the second language. Now that is correct, because it's very hard for you to try to break away from that rule, try to break away from that mindset. However, if you are able to, you are one step into a mastering a second language analysis. Next. Okay, now we're going to move on to the second question. I ask you, in your opinion, what makes communication in a second language feel authentic and natural? Now, from all these four questions, I find why I need to give a clarification is understandable. Again, who gave the answer of understandable?
Yes, sir.
Okay, can you tell me why do you make an answer like understandable?
I think in second language we have to understand each other's when we speak to each other's.
Okay. Now that your answer there is correct, but with an asterisk. Now the asterisk that I'm going to give you today is because you answered understandable. Well, that is correct. That is correct. A language needs to be understandable to be learned and to be completely mastered. The thing is, just because something is understandable does not mean it is grammatically correct. Again, you are not learning how to just say the word, you are not learning how to pronounce the word, but you also need to learn the sentence structure of that word, the sentence structure of that language. To be able to fully master it, those are the three things that you need to learn: grammar, pronunciation, and meaning. Now, while the meaning you have there, you have the meaning there, you have understandable and coherent there, but if you don't focus on the grammar, you're going to be wrong. You're going to get confused. You're going to get criticized if you are wrong. Now, another thing, again, meaningful. Yes, language needs to be meaningful. Just because you understand a good sentence structure, just because you understand that, but the language is not meaningful, it doesn't carry any sort of message to it, it's going to be less effective in mastering your language. One of you answered, maybe when they both understand each other, even they still making some mistake. Again, now that is quite interesting, because your understanding is that when learning in a second language manner, you need to have a partner, and if that partner or a person you are talking to are also making mistake, it gives a more stronger bond, because you both of you are learning that second language. So therefore, both of you can support each other. If one make a mistake in a pronunciation or grammar, If one were to make a mistake in a pronunciation, the others can fix that or can give advice on that. If one makes a mistake on his grammar structure, the others could help them in making the correct and a more proper sentence structure. Okay. Now we're going to move on to the last question. Now, what I want you to do is, how does code switching between languages change the way you express your identity and interact with each other? Okay. Now this is the last question. The question that I ask you is, how does code switching between languages changes the way you express your identity or interact with others? A lot of you said that you are more comfortable with learning the first language, which is your native tongue or your mother tongue, than you are going to speak with a second language. Now, in this case, Bahasa Indonesia or even Malay, Bangkanese, for example, you are more comfortable in speaking those languages than you are speaking with English. Now that is in reality is very true. Why? Because the social discourse that you experiences during your daily living have always created and nurtured the idea that you are more likely and you are more comfortable in learning and speaking your first language, your mother tongue, and then you are going to learn with a second language. But that idea needs to be changed. The social discourse regarding when you are speaking a second language needs to be understood because it is hard. In reality, learning a second language is not going to be easy. It's not going to be smooth along the way. That is the reality of it. You need to internalize the idea of which that to understood a language, you need to properly speak it, how to properly pronounce it, and how to properly understood the structures in that languages. That, at its core, how your identity is going to affect you when you are speaking a second language. When you are speaking your first language, I am going to assume a lot of you are going to speak it in a lot more bold and a more high tone and a more outspoken way of speaking. Then you're going to do that in English. You're going to be very meek. You're going to be very less likely to raise your voice, or you're going to answer it properly. Even if you are going to answer it, you're going to use a very basic form of that language. You're not going to make an attempt in using in more complex ways of wording, grammar structures, or communicate in a lot more complex way. But when you are doing that in your mother tongue, you're able to do that. Now, what I want you to understand is that you need to have the same exact perspective when you are using your mother tongue, and try to do that with your second language, because that is the core of it. The social and discourse aspect, the topic that I have given you today, is a way and a key for you into mastering and make an easy process in your daily activity in mastering your L2 or your second language competency. Okay, I think that is all for today's lecture. Thank you very much for joining, and I hope the topic and material that I've given you today, you're going to learn it, and hopefully you're going to use that in your way in processing your second language experiences.
Thank you, sir.